It had only been 4 months since my mother passed, when Uncle Roy showed up at the front gate. I still remember the way he leaned on it like he owned the place, elbow perched, cheap sunglasses tucked into his collar, a cigarette dangling from his lips like it had been glued there since 1994. "Emma," he said with that smile I never quite trusted. "Heard about your mom. I was just passing through. Thought I'd stop by and pay my respects." I didn't buy it for a second. The last time Roy visited, Mom ended up in tears for 3 days. He hadn't sent a single birthday card in years. Not a phone call, nothing. He was the type who borrowed money and forgot he'd done so. The type who drank too much and remembered too little. But he was still family. And that word used to mean something to me. I let him in. At first, he was on his best behavior. He complimented the garden, asked if I was sleeping all right, told me stories about my mother from when they were kids. I caught myself laughing once or twice. Stories I'd never heard, ones that painted her in a carefree light I'd forgotten she used to have. "Mind if I crash here for a week or two?" he asked on day 5. "Just until I get back on my feet. I've got some job leads in town. Won't be a burden." I hesitated. My gut twisted, but I nodded. "Just for a week or two," I said. He moved into the guest room the next morning. At first, things were manageable. He bought his own groceries, stayed out of my way. We didn't talk much, and I liked it that way. Then things started shifting. One day, I came home from work and found a manila envelope addressed to Roy Collins in the mailbox. It was from a real estate attorney's office. Another day, I overheard him on the phone, whispering in the kitchen, "Yeah, she's clueless. House is almost paid off. I'll call you back." I confronted him. He said I was imagining things, that I was still grieving, still paranoid. He even offered to leave if I didn't want him there. But he didn't leave. 2 weeks turned into 6. He started rearranging the furniture, saying things like, "We need more space in the living room," and "I think I'll paint the guest room." We, as if the house was his. I reminded him gently, this was my home. I'd lived here for 20 years, caring for Mom in her final days, paying every bill while he drifted through life like a tumbleweed. He chuckled, clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't get your feathers ruffled, Em. We're family, right?" Then, one Friday evening, I came home to find the locks changed. My key didn't work. There was a note on the door, in his handwriting. "Emma, this property's been transferred. You're no longer the rightful occupant. I'll be in touch." Roy. I stood on the porch for what felt like an hour, numb. The sky had turned that bleak orange before rain, and the only sound was the neighbor's sprinkler ticking back and forth like a metronome of mockery. I reread Roy's note 5 times, hoping it would magically say something different. It didn't. My hands shook as I dug through my purse for my phone. I didn't have many people to call. Mom had been my whole world for so long. But I did still have one friend left in town. Denise. Denise answered on the second ring. "Emma, everything okay?" I must have sounded off. I told her what happened, and to her credit, she didn't hesitate. "Stay right there. I'm coming." While I waited, I paced the sidewalk, pretending I wasn't terrified. What if Roy saw me and called the cops? What if I really wasn't the legal owner anymore? I hadn't thought to check. The house was in Mom's name, and after her death, the lawyer assured me the will was clear. Everything went to me. I'd even attended the court hearing. But I'd been grieving. Maybe I missed something. Denise pulled up 10 minutes later in her old Subaru. She still had her red curls tied in a bun and wore her nurse scrubs. She must have come straight from the hospital. She hugged me tightly. "Let's get you out of the cold first. We'll figure this out." At her place, over reheated lasagna and 2 sweet tea, I explained everything. From Roy's arrival to the locks being changed. Denise leaned back, arms crossed. "You said he got mail from a lawyer?" I nodded. I didn't open it. It was addressed to him. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like I was a child who'd left the stove on. I love you, but that man's scum. He always has been. Don't act like this is a surprise. I swallowed my pride. I didn't think he'd take everything. She sighed. You need to talk to someone who knows the law. I'll call my cousin, Ben. He's a real estate attorney. Just opened a small practice in town. He owes me a favor. 2 days later, I sat in Ben's tiny office, surrounded by dusty shelves and an overworked assistant. Ben, a man in his early 50s with thinning hair and a direct way of speaking, didn't waste time. You say you inherited the house? He asked. I handed him a folder with Mom's will and a copy of the court order that named me executor and sole heir. He read carefully, nodding. Everything looks fine here. You're the legal owner. At least you were as of 4 months ago. My chest tightened. What do you mean, were? Ben adjusted his glasses. Well, let's find out. If Roy filed anything official, it would be in the county property records. I'll have my assistant pull them. He left me alone for 15 minutes. I stared at the framed photos on the wall. Boats, lakes, quiet places. All things that now felt unreachable. When he came back, his expression had shifted. You're not going to like this, he said, sitting down. According to the records, the deed was transferred 6 weeks ago to Roy Collins. I blinked. That's not possible. I didn't sign anything. I didn't authorize anything. Ben tapped the file. That's what we need to find out. It's either forged, or you're a lot more generous than you remember. The next morning, I walked into the county records office with a lump in my throat and Denise at my side. The building smelled like dust and old carpet, and the clerk behind the counter looked like she hadn't smiled since 2003. I need to see the deed transfer documents for 814 Redwood Lane, I said, trying to keep my voice even. The clerk blinked at me slowly, pulled a form from under the counter, and handed it over. Fill this out. It'll take a day or two to process. Ben had warned me this might happen. We're not requesting a copy, I said, sliding the form back toward her. We're reviewing a legal discrepancy. There's likely a forged signature on file. That got her attention. Within 20 minutes, we were seated at a side table in a cramped room with a copier humming in the corner. A young clerk, much more helpful, brought us a folder marked Property Transfer, Redwood Lane. He handed me a copy of the transfer deed. My eyes went straight to the signature line. Emma Louise Carter, written in my own handwriting. Only. It wasn't mine. It was close. Whoever had done it had seen my signature before. But they'd tried too hard. The L looped too wide. The C curved wrong. I'd have known it was fake, even without the stomach-knotting certainty that I'd never signed anything of the sort. Ben, on speakerphone from his office, told us to request certified copies immediately and not say a word to Roy just yet. As Denise and I walked back to her car, the wind picked up. Dry leaves skittered across the parking lot like whispers we weren't meant to hear. You need to think about how far he's willing to go, Denise said quietly. If he faked your signature, that's a felony. He must think he's safe. I nodded, but my mind was somewhere else. Roy hadn't just thought he could get away with it. He was confident, like someone had told him it would work. Back at Denise's place, I dug through the one box I had salvaged from my home before the lockout. Inside was Mom's will, original, signed, notarized, and tucked beneath it, just where I'd last left it, was the title deed to the house, still in my mother's name, with instructions for transfer to me upon death. Clear, simple, clean. I emailed scanned copies to Ben. He called 5 minutes later. This is gold, he said. It confirms everything. Your mother's intention. The legal transfer. The forged document Roy filed contradicts all of this. Now we need to know who processed his paperwork. It shouldn't have gotten through. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking of Roy sitting in my kitchen, legs propped up, probably drinking from the mug I'd bought Mom on her last birthday. I pictured him smiling, that smug, snake oil grin that had always made my skin crawl. And I thought of one thing. This wasn't over. The next time I saw my house, I nearly didn't recognize it. I drove by slowly, heart pounding, and parked across the street, behind the shade of an overgrown elm. Roy had cut down Mom's rose bushes, torn out the garden beds she'd tended for years. In their place, there was patchy gravel, an old metal fire pit, and 2 rusting lawn chairs. But the real shock was the banner, tied between 2 poles by the mailbox. Open house, Saturday at 1 p.m. I stared at it, blinking, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight they cramped. He was trying to sell it. Ben had warned me Roy might escalate, but this? This was shameless. I took pictures of the sign, of the house, of the dumpster in the driveway. He was clearing it out, erasing every trace of Mom. And me. Denise was speechless when I showed her. "He's getting desperate," she finally muttered. "This means he's running out of time, or money." Ben confirmed it. Roy had taken out a small home equity line of credit against the house, already approved by a predatory lender. His credit history was a mess. He was gambling with something that didn't even belong to him. "What happens if he sells it before we can stop him?" I asked. Ben shook his head. "It'll complicate things, but with your documentation, we can file a lis pendens. It freezes any sale attempts during litigation. We're drafting it now." The word sounded cold. Legal, like armor. But I still had to see the damage with my own eyes. I went to the open house. I wore a hoodie and kept my head down. The place was packed. Strangers wandered through the living room where Mom and I once had tea. Kids ran across the wood floor. I refinished the summer before her cancer came back. A woman in a power suit chatted with Roy near the kitchen. He was calling himself the sole inheritor and saying things like, "These floors are original, perfect for flipping." He didn't see me at first, but then he did. And he froze, just for a second. Then he smiled that greasy smile and raised his glass like we were old friends. I turned and walked out. Later that night, I got a call. It was a woman. Her voice was quiet, almost nervous. "Hi? Is this Emma Carter?" "Yes," I said slowly. "This is Nancy. I work at the county clerk's office. I saw your name come up in a flagged file today. This might be nothing, but I didn't notarize that deed. My signature's on it, but I didn't sign it, and I wasn't there. Someone's using my stamp." I froze. Ben's theory was right. Someone inside, or someone with access, was helping Roy. Or covering for him. Maybe not willingly. "Can we meet?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, "Not at my place?" "Not at yours either." "There's a church on 3rd and Olive. I'll be in the parking lot at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I only have 5 minutes." The church parking lot was mostly empty by the time I arrived. A light drizzle tapped against the windshield as I waited, parked beneath a flickering street lamp. I watched every car that passed. My nerves were stretched thin, half from fear, half from anticipation. At exactly 6 o'clock, a beige sedan pulled into the far corner and parked under a tree. A woman stepped out, wearing a raincoat and baseball cap. She looked around quickly before hurrying toward my car. I unlocked the passenger door. "You Emma?" she asked, slipping in. I nodded. "Nancy?" She didn't answer, just glanced around, tense. "I don't have long." She pulled out a small folder from her coat and handed it to me. "That's a copy of the notary log from the week Roy submitted the deed. See that date?" She pointed to a line, red circled. "I wasn't working that day. I was out sick. But my name's on the paperwork, and this," she flipped to another page, "is the signature on file. That's not mine." I stared at it. Sure enough, the loops and lines were too perfect. Mechanical. Traced, maybe. Definitely forged. How would he even get access to your stamp? I asked. Her voice dropped. We used to keep stamps in a locked drawer, but I reported mine missing 2 months ago. I was told it must have been misplaced during the filing system upgrade. I blinked. So they knew? They downplayed it? She said. I think someone in the office is helping him, or covering for him. And I think Roy has dirt on someone, or someone has a reason to keep him happy. I felt sick. You need to be careful, Nancy continued. If he finds out I told you, I'll lose my job. Maybe worse. I nodded, clutching the folder. Thank you. Truly. She opened the door. Do what you need to do, but hurry. She vanished into the rain, her taillights glowing briefly before she was gone. The next morning, Ben filed the Elias Pendines. It was official. Any attempt to sell or refinance the property was now blocked pending legal review. A small but solid victory. Roy wouldn't know yet. Not until he tried to move forward with the sale. But someone else did know. That night, Denise's car was keyed. 3 deep gashes across the driver's side. No note, no witnesses. She tried to play it off. Could have been kids, could have been anyone. But I knew better. Roy was lashing out, or someone working with him was. And now I wasn't the only target. I called Ben. We need to move faster, I said. This isn't just fraud anymore. It's turning into something uglier. He sighed through the line. I'll file for an emergency hearing, but Emma, be ready. If we poke too hard, he might do more than scratch paint. I stood by the window that night, staring out into the dark, knowing Roy was still sleeping in my mother's bedroom. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. The court date came faster than I expected. Ben called early Monday morning. We're on the docket for this Friday. Emergency hearing. The judge wants everything tight. Facts, not emotion. I had plenty of both. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Ben coached me on what to say, how to present the documents, what to expect from Roy's side. Denise took off work to help me organize evidence. Mom's will, the notarized title, the forged deed, the stolen notary stamp report, and Nancy's sworn affidavit, which she'd bravely signed the day after our meeting. Do you think Roy will show up? I asked Ben over coffee the night before the hearing. Ben looked tired. He has to. His name's on the deed now, at least for now. And if he's still trying to sell, he'll want to defend his ownership. Denise put air quotes around ownership and muttered, slime ball. Friday came, gray and rainy again. I sat outside the courthouse in Ben's car, staring at the building like it might swallow me whole. I wasn't someone who belonged in court. I was someone who baked casseroles and watched documentaries, and had spent the last decade cleaning bedpans and whispering comfort to a dying woman. But that version of me was gone. Inside, Roy swaggered into the courtroom like he was walking into a poker game. He wore a wrinkled suit 2 sizes too big and a crooked tie. He smirked when he saw me, winked. The kind of wink that said, "You're already beat, sweetheart." His attorney was a man I recognized from town. A sleazy type who advertised on late-night radio with slogans like, "Don't let 'em push you around." He whispered something to Roy and then made a big show of shaking his head, as if inconvenienced to be there. Ben presented our case with quiet precision. He was methodical, calm. He walked the judge through the timeline, the original documents, the mismatch in signatures, and Nancy's notarized affidavit. Roy's lawyer objected constantly, claimed family confusion, said the house was gifted to Roy verbally before Emma's mother passed. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for nonsense, cut through it fast. "Do you have any evidence of this verbal agreement?" she asked. The lawyer squirmed. "Well, no, but..." The judge raised a hand. Then sit down. Roy fidgeted in his seat, his cockiness fading. I hadn't planned to speak. But when the judge looked at me and asked, "Do you have anything to add, Ms. Carter?" I stood. I looked straight at Roy. My mother trusted me to care for her, for our home. I was there when she could barely walk. I fed her, changed her, watched her slip away. Roy wasn't there, not once, and now he's trying to erase all of it. For what? A payday? That house isn't just a building. It's where my mother died. It's where I lived my entire adult life. He forged my name. He stole it. Roy stared at the floor. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Ms. Carter. We'll reconvene next week for the ruling. Until then, the property remains frozen. Neither party may take any further action regarding the deed or mortgage. Outside, I exhaled like I hadn't in weeks. But just as I reached Ben's car, a voice behind me called out, "You think this is over?" Roy muttered, too close to my ear. "You don't know the half of it." Ben stepped between us before I could respond. Roy smiled as he walked away. That smile chilled me more than the rain. I couldn't get Roy's words out of my head. "You don't know the half of it." It repeated in my mind like a riddle I didn't want the answer to. Ben dismissed it as posturing. "He's trying to scare you," he said. But Denise wasn't so sure. "Roy doesn't bluff," she murmured. "He manipulates. But when he threatens, it's because he's holding something." I needed to know what that something was. 3 days after the hearing, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo, just one. A picture of me, standing in Denise's kitchen, holding a coffee mug, clearly taken from outside the window. It was recent. I wore the sweater I'd bought last week. No note, no explanation, just proof someone was watching. I took the photo to Ben. He grimaced, then called a contact at the local police department. "This is escalating," he told the officer. "She's being followed, threatened, and she's not the only one." Denise filed a report too. Between the vandalized car and the photo, we finally got a patrol car to swing past her place at night. But Roy wasn't hiding anymore. That evening, as I stepped out of the grocery store, he was leaning against my car, like he'd been waiting. "Cute sweater," he said, smirking. "Warm enough for spying?" I didn't respond. I just opened my phone and hit record. "You want to say that again?" I asked. He leaned in closer, too close. "You're not gonna win. You think some court ruling makes you strong? You don't get it. This was never just about the house." "What's it about, Roy?" He didn't answer. Just tapped my window hard and walked away. I sent the video to Ben. The next morning, Ben's assistant found something while combing through public filings. Roy had recently filed bankruptcy, Chapter 13. But buried inside the paperwork was a name we hadn't seen before, Shirley Barnes, listed as a creditor and co-signer on a private loan Roy had taken out 6 months ago, right before he showed up on my doorstep. Ben raised an eyebrow. "You recognize the name?" "No," I said slowly. "Should I?" Denise, who'd been flipping through the documents beside us, suddenly stopped. "Wait, Barnes, that was your mom's maiden name, right?" My heart stopped. Ben started typing. In minutes, he had a result. Shirley Barnes, age 66, lives 3 towns over, retired, used to run a care home for seniors. "She's your mom's cousin," Denise whispered. And suddenly it clicked. My mother's estranged cousin, Shirley, had always been the black sheep. She and Mom hadn't spoken in decades, after some ugly fight over a small inheritance. I never met her, but I remembered Mom's words. "She'd sell your teeth while you were sleeping." And now she was tied to Roy. "She must have fronted the money," Ben said. "Or maybe she's more than just a creditor." It made sense. Shirley wanted payback. Roy needed money. They both had grudges. And my house, Mom's house, had become the perfect pawn. Now, I wasn't just up against Roy. There was someone smarter behind him, someone with a longer memory, and no hesitation. We drove to Shirley Barnes's house on a Thursday morning. Ben didn't think it was wise, but I couldn't sit and wait anymore. I needed to see her, look her in the eye, maybe understand what could make someone hate me enough to destroy everything I had left. Shirley's house was exactly what I expected. Large, over-decorated, with manicured hedges and a faux stone fountain that hadn't worked in years. Denise waited in the car while I walked up the path. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. I rang again. Finally, the door opened a crack. She looked older than I remembered from the one photo Mom had kept in a drawer. Her hair dyed too dark for her age, sharp eyes behind thick glasses. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Emma," she said, as if we were meeting for coffee. "Didn't think you'd show up, but then again, your mother always was predictable." I swallowed hard. "Why are you doing this?" She opened the door wider, but didn't invite me in. "Doing what? Helping family? Making sure what should have been mine doesn't go to waste?" "You didn't even visit when Mom was dying." "She didn't want me there," she snapped. "She made that clear when she cut me out of her will." "So this is about revenge?" She smiled. Cold. "It's about justice. Roy's a fool, but he's useful. And unlike your mother, I don't forget debts." I held up a copy of the court papers. "You're on record as financially tied to a fraudulent deed. You will be implicated." Her smile faded slightly. "I have more friends in that courthouse than you know," she said. "You think this ends with a judge's decision? You're naive." I stepped back. I'm done being naive. I'm done letting people like you rewrite what my mother worked for." Shirley didn't slam the door. She just closed it, slow and deliberate. Ben was furious when I told him. "She admitted enough," he said. "We'll bring this to the judge. Let her see the whole pattern." The storm was getting closer, but for the first time, I was ready to walk through it. The courthouse felt different that day. Not colder, just quieter, heavier. Ben had compiled everything: the fraudulent transfer, the notary forgery, Nancy's affidavit, the Elias pendants, and now the financial link to Shirley Barnes. We had dates, documents, sworn statements. It was no longer a family dispute. It was a case of orchestrated property theft. Roy showed up late. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Unshaven, suit rumpled, jaw clenched like it hurt to breathe. And he was alone. No Shirley, no lawyer. The judge, precise and no nonsense, read through Ben's filings, flipping through pages slowly. Her silence filled the room like thunder before a storm. Finally, she looked up. "The court finds the transfer of ownership to Mr. Roy Collins to be fraudulent and invalid. The property in question will be returned to Ms. Emma Carter, effective immediately." Roy slumped. Then, the second blow. "Additionally, this court is forwarding evidence of potential criminal activity, including forgery, fraud, and conspiracy, to the district attorney's office for review." I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. Later, as we walked out into the sun, Roy followed. I braced for another threat, but he didn't speak. He just looked at me, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see arrogance or cruelty. I saw fear. He stepped closer and whispered, "She promised this wouldn't happen." I didn't ask who she was. He turned and walked away, swallowed by the city crowd. The house was colder than I remembered. Ben handed me the keys in a quiet moment on the courthouse steps. "We'll have the locks changed by tomorrow," he said. "Police will escort you in, just in case." It wasn't necessary. Roy was gone. The door creaked when I opened it. Dust hung in the air. The furniture was gone, and what remained looked like an afterthought. Curtains ripped down, old picture frames tossed in a closet. The kitchen table, the one I grew up eating around, had a cigarette burned dead center. Still, it was mine again. I walked through the rooms in silence. The bedroom where my mother spent her final months was empty now, but I could still picture the lamp on her nightstand, the sound of her voice late at night. In the closet, I found one of her sweaters tucked behind a box, soft, still faintly carrying the scent of lavender. I sat on the floor and held it for a long time. Over the next week, I cleaned every corner. Denise helped. She brought over muffins and cleaning supplies and told me stories from her shift just to make me laugh. She never said congratulations. She knew that wasn't the word for this. Ben called midweek to let me know the DA had opened an inquiry. Shirley hadn't returned any calls. Roy, he said, had lawyered up, but quietly. They're scrambling, he told me. You did everything right. But I wasn't thinking about Roy or Shirley anymore. I was thinking about what came next. A month later, I listed the house for rent, not for sale. I didn't want to live in it anymore. Too many ghosts. But I wasn't letting go of it either. Not this time. The lease was signed by a young couple expecting their first child. I met them on the porch, handed over the keys, and said the only thing that felt right. Take care of it. This house carries a lot of love. Then, for the first time in years, I got in my car and drove with no destination. The wind in my face, music on low, I felt something settle in my chest. Not revenge, not even justice. Peace.